It's been 10 years since the release of Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty in 2001. The series has since expanded with multiple sequels, spin-offs, and a future of various possibilities. Hell, at this rate, they might as well call Kojima Productions Metal Gear Productions instead. But even with the 25th anniversary of the series hitting us in nearly a year, it's pretty easy to lose track of the more humble roots of the series. Metal Gear Solid was released to much acclaim for the PlayStation in 1998. While the Metal Gear series has been successful in the 1980s as an NES remake of the original MSX version, Metal Gear Solid marked a new era for the series. Given its success, it was a given that a sequel would be greenlighted immediately after release. Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty caught the attention of the mainstream gaming audience. Not only was it a sequel to a blockbuster hit that people thought of as the first in the series, but it was being developed on the PlayStation 2 and the trailers were showing off the graphics used in gameplay and cinematic cutscenes, which proved that Sony's new console was a much bigger deal than Sega's Dreamcast. Unless you were too busy to notice. Every single trailer for Sons of Liberty would cause a massive overload of internet traffic to Konami's servers, and herds of people to crowd up Konami's booth at E3. Upon release, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty became a hit. To date, it remains the highest-selling Metal Gear title. High sales certainly do not mean high satisfaction, though. People were not happy with the final product. The demo, which was bundled with Zone of the Enders, met high praise, and very little changed from the presentation and gameplay mechanics, at least for the first chapter of the game. Even the weird comment about the Lale Lulai Lo probably met with little more than a shrug. Okay, wait, Liquid Snake is back as an arm? Oh, okay, that is kinda dumb, but that's what, Snake is dead? Huh? Then who the fuck is it? He's Snake? No, he doesn't sound, no. No, is this a girl? And for most people, it got worse and worse and worse. Some of the criticism is valid, and I myself actually do agree with some of it.
We've managed to avoid drowning. Good job.
I'm not here to somehow change your opinion on Sons of Liberty, be it good or bad. That's not what this is about. Nor does your opinion on other Metal Gear titles play any significance on this topic. What's important here is understanding why Sons of Liberty was what it was. Sons of Liberty is not your typical sequel. Yeah, it's a stealth action title like Metal Gear Solid. Sure, it takes place within the same fictional canon, but while the story of Metal Gear Solid and previous Metal Gear titles can be taken literally, all of which unfolded as B-movies, albeit good ones, Sons of Liberty absolutely should not be considered your typical sequel. If you do, then you are taking it literally, and that is where a lot of the alleged problems with the title stem from. Ever heard of the parable of the broken window? The lesson applies to Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty as well. Frederick Bastiat introduced it in an 1850 essay discussing unintended consequences related to what is typically seen as beneficiary economic activities. The point is essentially summarized by the title of Bastiat's essay, which translates into English as that which is seen and that which is unseen. The criticism of Sons of Liberty oftentimes deals with what is immediately seen. We fight a fat guy in roller skates. We play as a girly man wearing a tight outfit that showcases his ass. We hear comical dialogue.
A node.
Did you say nerd?
Not nerd. Node.
Oh.
As a simple script, Sons of Liberty really is as bad as some people make it out to be. However, what is not seen is why Solid Snake becomes a supporting character for most of the game, why Vamp keeps on coming back, why your name is on Raiden's dog tags, and so forth. Most importantly though is the meme theme. The Gene theme in the original Metal Gear Solid was pretty straightforward, with Solid Snake rejecting the notion that his genes controlled him, and the twist revealed in the post-credit phone call between Revolver Ocelot and Solidus that completely demolishes Liquid's bitch fest about his genes. With Sons of Liberty, the question is if memes can control people. Though the term meme was coined by Richard Dawkins, the concept of memories, ideas, culture, history, and so forth spreading from person to person has been discussed prior. There are plenty of examples of memetics within Sons of Liberty, with Stillman essentially creating Fat Man by passing on his bomb-making skills, and and Solid Snake's point about making history, but let's focus on how the game itself used memes to control your behavior. While everyone who has played and finished Sons of Liberty should have had a different experience, for the most part, it should have been the same thematically. Likewise, from the success of the original Metal Gear Solid, it was clear what players were expecting from Sons of Liberty. The game knew what the majority of people expected, and it used this to make a point. Raiden, who until later in the game doesn't even have an identity, is you, the player. Raiden did the Shadow Moses mission in VR. You played a game called Metal Gear Solid, but in a sense, the mission in Metal Gear Solid was a virtual reality. You played as Solid Snake, but even though you could control Snake and make him knock on walls, hide in boxes, and smoke, you were not Snake. You did not bring a feisty redhead home. You did not save the world. You did not befriend a genius anime nerd. You did not make amends with an old friend who was kind of an enemy and yet not really. No, a fictional video game character did all of this. Similarly, Raiden may have done essentially what Solid Snake did in Shadow Moses, but it was a simulation. It did not actually happen. The S3 plan being Solid Snake's simulation was debunked by the Patriot AI near the end of the game.
The S3 plan does not stand for Solid Snake Simulation.
But to be fair to Ocelot, there is some truth in it. The big shell really was modeled after the memes of Shadow Moses, or Metal Gear Solid. Raiden, or rather, you, reacted to these situations that were simply being repeated. You, much like the pawn President Johnson, have little choice. You must see the Patriots as the ultimate evil, which they are, but you have to kill your Dr. Octopus father and then meet up with your girlfriend, who may or may not be real.
You have to believe me.
Damn!
Even knowing the truth, you have to either finish or quit the game. Keeping in mind that Metal Gear Solid actually borrowed a lot of elements from Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, which itself, to a slightly smaller degree, borrowed from the original Metal Gear, you start to wonder if the deliberate usage of Metal Gear Solid's memes is a commentary on sequels, in particular, video game sequels. While all of the previous Metal Gear sequels up until Sons of Liberty were never planned, they were never intended to be the final installment. Indeed, both the original Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid include cliffhangers. Sons of Liberty was not only planned, albeit with Kojima intending to lease direction in the hands of someone else, but it was also meant to become the end of the series. Any future installments would have been done by the next generation, according to Kojima. While it came to be that Hideo Kojima was to work on even more Metal Gear titles after the fact, it should be noted that the events of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater took place nearly 40 years prior to those in Sons of Liberty. Snake Eater, like Sons of Liberty, was also meant to be the end of the main series. It wasn't until the unplanned 2008 sequel, Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, where things were actually wrapped up from Sons of Liberty. Hideo Kojima explained it best.
Once again, I'd intended for Metal Gear Solid 3 to wrap up the series, but so many people wanted to know what happened after 2. Things like the identity of the Patriots and so forth. I had planned on leaving those mysteries as mysteries, but people weren't convinced that the series was wrapped up, so ultimately we ended up making 4.
Of course, if we leave it at that, the purpose of this video is non-existent. We are focusing on Sons of Liberty in 2001. You know, back when fans were fighting about why Liquid can take over Ocelot's body, how Vamp can get resurrected, if the events even took place, and of course, the identity of the Patriots. Believe it or not though, Sons of Liberty was going to be even more ambiguous than it already was. For starters, it was going to be titled MGS3, with the purpose of making fans go, what happened to 2?
The Hudson River, 2 years ago.
Oh yeah. Another example of the game being more open-ended in the planning stage is the identity of the ninja. We know it's Oga now, but the original plan was to have the identity remain as a mystery. To quote Hideo Kojima's game plan,
Players will have to make up their own minds regarding her identity, as an answer is never given.
is it frustrating? For many people, absolutely. Questioning reality is not comfortable, even in the fictional sense. Closure gives rest to wandering minds who don't want to be left behind with questions. The reality is that the postmodern nature of the narrative means that there's no absolute truth to it.
There's no such thing in the world as absolute reality.
This changed with Guns of the Patriots, sure, but up until that, everything was entirely up to the player. Maybe it was a VR mission. Maybe the Patriots are the developers themselves. Maybe Vamp is resurrected by water. These are just some of the theories fans have made with good arguments behind them. Despite being a clear reactionary response to the backlash for Raiden and, most importantly, the narrative of Sons of Liberty, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater did not attempt to answer any of the questions left behind. In this way, and despite actually sharing some common themes, Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots became the antithesis to Sons of Liberty.
Nanomachines.
With 2008's Guns of the Patriots, the events of Sons of Liberty are canonized as reality. Prior to that, the question of reality was still up in the air. In the end of Sons of Liberty, Raiden has accepted everything as reality. He has abandoned his role as the player, quite literally actually, and assumes his own identity. He believes that his girlfriend Rose is bearing his real child. All of this, despite some serious questions about his so-called reality.
I'm pregnant, John.
It's sort of like the ending of the 2010 film Inception, where Cobb uses a method to determine if he is in a dream or reality. But instead of waiting to see the result of his test, he simply accepts life as reality, walks away, and the shot cuts to black, leaving audiences to speculate the result of his test. However, it doesn't matter to Cobb, much like it doesn't matter to Raiden. So where does that leave us, the players? You may think we were left in the dark, but like the ending of Inception, the ambiguity actually gives audiences something to think and talk about. There is some truth to Sons of Liberty having a lot of dialogue through its numerous cutscenes and codec conversations, but it really does do a lot more showing than telling. It becomes up to the player to decide what is happening. This was intentional.
In the game, Raiden asked Snake a few times, "What am I supposed to do?" But I made sure that Snake's response is always, "It's up for you to decide." That is really the message I want to tell players. You need to decide what is important for you to take away from the experience.
Making sense of the ridiculous story of Sons of Liberty is the complete opposite of understanding its reality, as its plot is nothing but a vessel for its message to the player. The game asks players a good number of questions, but one of the most significant is the questioning of reality, which in actuality is fiction being told so many times that it becomes accepted as reality. Plenty of contemporary huge blunders were not the results of stupid men, but rather the intelligent scholarly types who believe that the theories they have studied, which are based on empirical, scientific, mathematic, and statistical methods, are in fact reality, and all contrarian and praxeological views are to be laughed at as pseudoscience because, after all, they're not based in reality.
Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between reality and a game.
As is the case in life, Sons of Liberty does not define its reality for you. In fact, the first time you pick up that controller and play through it, it demonstrates how little we truly know about reality itself. Which is why, as the game was designed to make us do, we should always question reality and decide for ourselves what it means instead of relying on others to do it for us.
This is why it's so nervous.